Welcome back, mere mortal lights, to another edition of Musings. You've got Juan here on this side of the mic,
Kyron here on the other side.
and it's the 31st of May, and today we're going to be talking about superfluous things. Now, this particular topic, and I'll give you a bit of a precursor, musings for us here, folks at home, unless you're a mere mortals avid fan. We like to discuss particular topics, things that we find interesting. And to be honest, this one came up for me in a myriad of different ways. And so I think it'd be worth having a conversation about. And when I mentioned it to you off air, you also seem to have some thoughts and ideas already coming into this. So I think it'll be a pretty good fun conversation, this one. So specifically, I wanted to talk about superfluous things. And, this could be a myriad of different ways into how we try to deal with getting superfluous things out of our way, how we might find them useful, where we've been able to vanquish them, where we're having difficulties, plenty of things. How it reflects from a podcasting perspective with ums and ers and all this extra stuff that we might do. Yeah. So we'll get into a lot of that. But the specific place where I got this idea from was I'm reading at the moment Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. And in that book, again, the short chapters, which I really love. And one of the particular ones was around superfluousness. And I'll actually read it directly from Ryan Holiday's website because it's easier. And it was about keeping the main thing, which I liked. So I wish I knew how people do good. Well, I wish I knew how people do good and long sustained work and still keep all kinds of other lines going, social, economic, etc. That's a John Steinbeck quote. Specifically, the truth is that it's impossible to be committed to anything professionally or personally without the discipline of saying no to all those other superfluous things. So I like that. I like that aspect of, hey, you got to say no to all the superfluous things. But more specifically, you kind of have to figure out as well, hey, well, what is superfluous to our lives, right? Because it doesn't always have to be the same thing to everyone. That's not the case. And a small definition that I actually pulled up as well, because I thought it would be helpful, is for superfluousness is unnecessary, but especially through being more than enough. And I think that's the key piece. It's the being more than enough. So if you could get away with, and here we're talking just in the conversation in the podcast, if you could get away with saying this sentence without adding ums, ers, and like, yeah, then it's more than enough. You don't have to add those things. Now, we do that just because it's a way of talking and the way that we probably grew up and how we've just been accepted in that way. And you'd have to kind of crack it down if you needed to get rid of it. But that's a little bit of a summary as to why that idea sort of popped to mind.
Nice. Yeah, I wanted to add to that the kind of definition. For me, I wrote, if you stop doing it, nothing would change. And I think therefore it's not really a bad thing per se. So you really have to identify, okay, even if you've got something like gambling addiction, for example, I wouldn't say that's a superfluous thing because that's really got a negative impact. If you stop doing it, things would change, and you would identify that. And I think it's just useful to add in, okay, there can be things which you might not want and might not be helpful, but they're not necessarily superfluous. Superfluous is, as you kind of hinted before, it's almost of a too much thing. And if you stopped using it, doing it, ingesting it, whatever it is, then nothing that much would change in your life. You would just have more time. And yeah, I think that's
yeah, absolutely. And I think
point.
it's defining it within, and we'll probably get into that, especially through examples where defining what is superfluous for an individual is hard. Like I'm going to say, I spent quite a bit of time thinking about it and going, okay, is this actually superfluous, or is it kind of feels necessary, and maybe it is in some regards. While there are other
how would you do
aspects
that? How would you identify if something is superfluous?
Well, see, it does. I think it was predominantly the two aspects of, is it necessary or not necessary? One, determined by the goals or what you are trying to achieve, again, by a certain time, because it is very different that, hey, if you want to run, right, if you want to go from the couch to 5 kilometers, then it is superfluous to get to the minutia of the specific shoe that you're running with, to, are you getting down to the right seconds in your pace strategy and your cadence. It's almost superfluous to getting to 5 kilometers, but that is very different to if you want to be a 5 kilometer world champion. Then it isn't superfluous to be getting the absolute detail that you need, because you kind of need that to get to that level. And so I was trying to think it more in, okay, against the goals that I care about. And that's why reading the Ryan Holiday piece is, it's kind of preset by what is the main thing for each other. So, for myself, it's very different, the things that I need to keep as the main thing versus for yourself. And so we'll have different things that are superfluous to one another, because just as one thing might be an unnecessary addition. So, we talked about this in the monthly goals. If I was really going down the path of just going ahead and creating a website, creating an app and designing an app and building an app and developing it, that's superfluous, realistically. Why? Because unnecessary is one point. It's more than enough in the sense of, hey, my goals here are looking after a baby, looking after a family, doing the work that I'm doing, focusing on the Mere Mortals podcast and a few other items. Hey, creating an app is kind of superfluous at this stage, unless there was a specific strategy that I was putting it down to the podcast. And even then, it's probably not even the right level of priority. So I think it's being quite aware of what the main thing is for one another, and then whether something is unnecessary or superfluous to achieving those goals. And you can't, and I think this is the trap that people can get into. And as I was reading this, is I can imagine people kind of falling into, oh, well, everything's a priority. Okay, if everything's a priority, well, nothing's a
Nothing
priority,
is.
right? If everything's a main thing, nothing's a main thing. So you have to have one, two, maybe three at the max of the main things. Everything beyond that, you can start terming it as being superfluous.
For me, when I identify it, I usually need a kind of secondary symptom sort of thing. So I can't
Mm,
really know that well in particular if there's one action that I'm doing, if that's superfluous or not. But usually it's kind of, I'll have a kind of underlying anxiety or something like that in my life where things will be relatively good or the same as kind of usual, and we've all got our bullshit and stuff, but you kind of deal with that, you accept it, you move on, etc., etc. But there'll be times when I'll feel kind of just like a little bit anxious. I kind of describe it as an energy that has been pent up or something, and it's not getting released correctly. And so usually that's when I can kind of identify, oh, I'm doing some silly things like overstretching. I like to stretch before I work out and stuff, but there was times when I would go through these massive sessions in the morning, and then I would also have 45 minutes of kind of stretching before I would do the actual workout, and I would just be overdoing it. It was so much that I didn't need to do it.
mm,
And so that was definitely that kind of, oh, is this, and then that would usually result in me having to kind of quicken my workouts, or I would extend them out, and then that would push this other thing out that I was planning on doing in the afternoon or evening, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely times I think when it's I, I I think I can identify when I'm doing some silly stuff or some stuff that's just not needed, because I'll kind of get anxious, just a general
mm.
anxiety if I'm doing that particular task, or even just in general.
Okay. So I had a question for you, actually. Thinking it might be a good step, and you already gave an example here of one superfluous things that maybe perhaps you were doing and you kind of moved away eventually. But so I want to ask you, and I can answer as well, and then we can look at it from the other manner. But I think it might help me immortalize out there. Is is there a thing that maybe generally can be considered, superfluous in most everyday people's lives, that either you've vanquished, or you've been able to manage, or you've been able to just kind of really just bypass it, or even if it is just to yourself, where you go, oh yeah, I've been able to manage that, I've been able to contain it, or just deal with it quite easily, and you can continue to do it.
I wrote three big ones down.
Okay.
These I think will apply to most people, not all. Number one, politics. It reminds me of this Ginsberg quote, Allen Ginsberg. So he's a guy who was a poet around the time of Jack Kerouac when he wrote On the Road. And so this quote is, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves through the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix, angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of the night. So it's very poetic, but I always like that first bit. The best minds of my generation destroyed by madness. I think politics is that, man. If you focus too much on politics, your mind and your whatever it is that makes you a human just gets degraded. Yeah, you're thrown into madness. I feel that it's just such a waste of time for almost everyone to show an even iota of interest in politics, because it's just, you can't affect it. Yeah, it's one of those things where
Mm,
it's just talking about things. And if you saw uh, people taking this kind of same level of analysis onto the Keeping Up with the Kardashians or something, you would just be like, look at this idiot. Like, they're wasting their life obsessed with these people who don't give a shit about them. And yet I see politics exactly like that. So that's one of
mm,
them. I think too much time under the influence of anything really mind or body altering. So if you drink too much, I think that's superfluous. That's kind of, and even getting into that negative
mm,
sort of territory. How many times have we gone out in just in our lives, and this is you and me I'm talking about, where we've had too much to drink and we've kind of blacked out portions of the night, or you know, it's degraded the experience of what
mm,
that night was. There's been nights where I've overdrank, obviously, and I've blacked out, and that is just totally superfluous. That's just a straight up night of my life that is now gone.
mm,
There's nothing in there. I can't remember if it was great or not. It's just poof. So I think when you if you get yourself to a chemical state where it's too much, that's probably superfluous. And then the last one, complaining. We're all guilty of this, but it's so much more noticeable when it comes from others, and especially when it has no follow up action related to
mm.
it. So yeah, that those are, I think, the big three that I particularly notice, and ones which, the politics one I'm pretty good at avoiding, but those other two, they creep up every now and then, and so
And
I gotta
that's what I was
watch
going to
out
ask
for
you.
it.
So, like, say with politics, I think you're pretty good because you deviate away from that hard, but from the substance and
Complaining.
from the from your perspective, do you find that it's still a thing that in occasions it'll come up and it'll kind of override your feeling of even knowing that it's superfluous?
It's not as bad. I think this is just the benefits of getting older. It was unthinking before. When you and
Mm,
I used to go out with friends, and I would drink to excess, that was kind of, I'd do it and then I'd repeat it a month later. I
gotcha.
don't do that as much anymore, and if
Mm,
it is, it's kind of a mistake per se, rather
mm,
than a continual bad habit. It's more, I went out with you guys, and I'm a lot more conscious of it now, for sure.
gotcha. So
And
I guess
yeah,
I would term them as these are superfluous things which are known knowns. Like that they're superfluous, and you know what's going to happen actively if you choose to go down that path. But and you choose not to quite often. So it's politics, complaining, or excessively consumption of alcohol or anything else.
yeah. So those are definitely ones for me, but I think those are probably the most general type of ones that I kind of see.
Yeah, that I can see from others. I think for me, one of the ones, and look, this might not be super general, but I tend to think it can be. One of the things personally where I found that I've been able to do away from this superfluous thing that, I just see it when you see people walking around is clothing choices. And I think you also similarly do this as well. For me, honestly, for a long time in my life, I haven't particularly cared. There might have been sections of my early work days where I really wanted to wear the jacket or wear the tie or wear the right shirt. Nowadays, I'm going to be frank with everyone. I tend to just buy, if I like a shirt type or a shirt material, I'll just buy it. I'll buy five of them. I'll buy the same shorts. I'll
Nice,
buy the same
classic.
shoes. It doesn't matter. Just get. So one of the things I've been getting into as well is maybe because it's winter, maybe because I just find it more comfortable. I'm starting to wear shirts which are way larger than I really would need them. So this shirt at the moment that I'm wearing, what sort of size does this look like for people at home? Obviously, you might not be able to see the video if you're not watching it. Um, what would be your guess?
Oh,
Their current.
geez. Well, I just know you, so I'm. I would be guessing like an extra large or something.
Well, that's and that's kind of like the look and feel that I'm going for, but it's triple extra large. So I'm going with triple. Yeah, so I think I've bought like cheap shirts but I've got 10, 15 new triple extra large shirts, and it's the superfluous nature of, it is unnecessary and there's, you can tell me it's superfluous to have so many shirts, and okay, maybe that's true, but it's unnecessary to have Tommy Hilfiger jumper and shirt or all these other things. To me, really is, hey, I'm fine wearing just plain clothes that are quite cheap, that are just easy, and they've got a good quality to them. Fine, cool, that's it, that's enough. So I think that
That's one
in
of the ones
general,
where I went through a phase because I'm not naturally great at matching colors, interior design, decoration, that kind of artistic feel for what isn't acceptable. When I was buying suits, I would always jump onto the websites, whereas you can wear this with this color, shoes should match the belt, socks should match the trousers, that sort of, learning all the general rules. And I remember there was a period where I did try and care about matching my clothes to uh, make it more stylish, I guess. And I never noticed anything compliments or detractions either way. It was just, yeah, it was just extra effort for no benefit.
for no benefit.
Yeah.
I've noticed that difference in some regards, but honestly, the difference between me wearing an expensive, again, I've got a very expensive T-shirt, right? That I've got one that I made around ours had main shield. And I was like, okay, cool, I want to buy the shirt. Do you think I've noticed a difference between me wearing that and I'm wearing a $5 shirt when I go out and about? No, absolutely not. And so for me, it's kind of like it's superfluous. And even meant, that buying that shirt, to me, I can identify like that's so superfluous for at least for me, right? Like why would you even need to do that? So I think that's probably the key one. Give me another example. I mean, you already mentioned the stretching one, but there another one that there's an item in life where it's superfluous, so it's a known, but you almost either can't help yourself in doing it, or you're almost deeming it as I kind of know it's superfluous, but I feel like it's necessary. Is there something in your life where you go, yeah, I'm still struggling with this, even though I kind of know that it's superfluous to my life?
Yeah, this would be personality related to liking things neat and orderly. So things like cutting the vegetables to a certain size, for example, or making sure they all get diced, or podcast related stuff. I used to be really finicky about the ID3 tags, and it's okay to be finicky as long as you're measuring if it's having an outcome or not.
Yep.
Here's a classic example. So I've been creating a lot more shorts and clips lately, and for each of them, I was filling in as much data on the YouTube upload as I could. Location where it was filmed, date that it was filmed, extra tags that might be useful, uh, you know, full on descriptions for each one, describing what is going on in the clip as well. I did this for probably 3 or 4 months, 3 months, and then I had a look at, okay, what's every other YouTuber doing? They've got more popular clips, they've got more viral stuff, and none of them had any. Even just putting a hashtag in the description almost seems like overkill nowadays. So now I just have it upload, maybe write 2 or 3 hashtags as it's uploading, and then just go put it in a playlist. Even that is probably excessive. Move on. And the point is, I was doing all of these extra things, and it was because I like filling in. Those boxes to be filled in. Oh,
Yep.
Karen's
Yeah. Gotta
Karen's
fill it in. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
wanting to jump in
For
on
it to
that.
feel complete, almost.
Yeah, exactly. And it was having no noticeable benefit, and so I just stopped doing that, and it had no noticeable detraction. So yeah, it's those are more like personality things where it's kind of doing the routine because I like the routine. Means I don't have to
Mm.
think. Doesn't mean it means I don't have to experiment. Doesn't mean it means I don't have to analyze. And I can get myself into a rut sometimes by being too finicky. And you've seen
Mhm.
plenty of this examples when I would make sure that all of our spelling was on the podcast was tip top shape. I would make sure I would just go too far. So that's kind of a personality thing for myself, definitely.
Okay. Yeah, I reckon a lot of people would share that as well. My one, and I know you know this, and definitely I know this, but it's still something that even after I'm gonna articulate it now, I go no, but it's kind of necessary. But deep down, I kind of know it's superfluous, which is just getting too much news, like too much information. There's an overabundance slash unlimited amount of information that you can really get in today's age, right? And I will often find myself in the mornings still going through a bit of a even if I'm chock a block busy. There's a lot of things. Somewhere deep down in me goes, hey, I still want to just check quickly just the latest financial information and the latest Brisbane information, and hey, also the latest Moscow Times and what's happening in China and what's happening in the US and what's happening in the stock market here and what's happening. And I'll get into this mentality of, oh, there's more, there's more to know, there's more to understand of what's happening, and that could be a good thing in some regards. But again, if I was to really look at it very directly and go, well, what's the thing that I'm trying to keep as the main thing? It isn't actually that helpful. It is unnecessary for me to know or for me to be able to articulate to people, hey, there was an earthquake in Melbourne yesterday, and oh, hey, by the way, rents are going to rise potentially by 10% in the Australian area because of this and that and the RBA conversation that happened. Sure, I might know that and I might articulate here, and maybe I'll share like 10% of that with somebody else, and 2% of the off chance that I have a conversation with someone at random and go, hey, I've heard about this, but honestly, for probably 99.99%, it's superfluous. And if I didn't do it at all, which there was times in the last month where I didn't just because of circumstance, it didn't change anything. And I kept the main thing being the main thing. So that's something where I know it's superfluous, but man, I struggle heaps to get away with it, often because I find myself with the time to be able to do that.
Mm,
So I'll almost schedule in, hey, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes while I'm having a coffee or sipping on some tea to go and find out this information. Whereas, that's kind of superfluous. Maybe there are other tasks I could be doing so that those 15 minutes are probably better spent on doing the main thing. Because again, added up over time, it's not just the time that it takes up, but it's the mental capacity and the mental space and the even not doing it on a day and then going, oh, I wonder what's happening. Well, I should go and check out when I'm supposed to be keeping my mind on the main thing.
mm.
So I think that's a predominant one for me.
It might be worth lingering on this because I think this is probably something that for the audience members they would struggle with the most. I'm guessing this would probably be the most common problem of online consumption of things, and that being superfluous. That's probably, if I had to guess, what would be the main superfluous thing that people would identify as they overuse and there's no benefit to the overuse. I'm
Mm.
guessing it would be digital and online stuff. So, what do you have any thoughts? Because this I don't think is particularly applicable to me, but we can kind of get into that as well. Do you have any thoughts on how you identify if it is too much news or it's the right quality of news or of this particular topic that you're investigating or listening to at the moment? Is
Mhm.
it just another rehash of stuff you've already heard before? Is it evergreen content or is it something that will disappear within, 3 months time?
Yeah, I mean, it ultimately I think comes back to the keep the main thing the main thing, and if it isn't serving that purpose, not even it doesn't have to be 100%, but even 50%, or you can't make an articulated regardless to why it isn't serving the main thing because I can make an articulation as to why it's beneficial for me to do that. But that's the same as saying, well, it's beneficial if I go and stand on my head and practice that because it'll be good for whatever else, and maybe it'll be beneficial for me to try and do the splits. But again, that's not the main thing. So that's not a good enough answer. There, there is a potential that, for me personally, I see it this way: it should be enough. This is the leeway I'm going to give myself from an information perspective. It should be enough so that the main things which I do, which part of it is interacting and communicating with people on a day to day basis, work perspective, partner perspective, family perspective, enough that I can have adequate conversations about the general day to day's life that I might find of interest. But there's a caveat between that and all of a sudden just researching for research sake, which I can really get down into the weeds into. That that superfluousness is, unless there's a reason for going about and do that, I would prefer and specifically this for information. I like the just in time information, not just in case information. And I get myself in the just in case all the time. And I think it's moving towards the, hey, no, it's just in time information, not just in case information.
Mm. What I'm noticing for myself is I have this habit where if it's probably not that useful or it is bordering on the superfluous, that's when I notice myself getting distracted with other things. So if I'm listening to a podcast whilst I'm having dinner, I'll kind of have access to, my plate of food, my phone with me, and it's playing something. And then I'll start be picking it up and I'll start be going onto different apps. And that's when I know, okay, whatever I'm listening to is obviously not the most important thing in the world.
Hmm.
Whereas something like podcasting 2.0, sure, I might be doing something else whilst listening, but my attention is on that almost 95% of the time of pure, and I will go back if I realized, oh, I wasn't really listening the last 5 minutes because I was writing a boost message in or I was doing something
Hmm.
kind of etc outside of it. So that for me
Yeah.
is probably the big one when it's I notice my attention drifting off and I start using other things. That's when it goes, oh, okay, yeah, that's this is probably not as helpful or needed.
No, absolutely. Let's get into some Boostagrams. I do bring it up as well. We'll get into the Boostagram Lounge. Then we might come back and talk about some specific time perspective when it comes to superfluousness, because it doesn't you can't just brush with a wide stroke and say that it's superfluous always, because it definitely always comes down to some more specifics as well. So I think let's get into some
Sounds
of the
good.
Boostagrams first.
The Boostagram
Um,
Lounge. Do you have
Boo.
access to the Discord, or do you
I
want me to?
do. I do indeed.
All right,
Yep.
sweet.
I was
I'll
going to
let
bring it
you.
up on my computer, but my computer's been giving me so much trouble at the moment, folks. The touchpad,
Mm,
for some unknown reason, and only really began a couple of days ago, it doesn't scroll very well anymore. So I can't like move up and down easily, and it'll just all of a sudden randomly start clicking on random things,
nice.
like almost like if it's pressed down. So I love when it just gives me all that crap.
Beautiful.
But in any case, we're going to talk through here on the Boostagram Lounge. So this is people who have been sending through Boostagram supporting the podcast, and we obviously like to share it out and talk about those messages that come on through.
Yep.
I believe
So it
the
should be the
latest.
25th. Is the
Yes,
first
so
one.
this is Dave Jones. All right, so we've got Dave Jones here. The weekly boost for the Mere Mortal Nation, 12,112 sat cent using Cron. Again, Dave, always very much appreciate
Yeah. Now I
these
think
weekly
we've
boosts.
probably missed two or three of his. It's kind of weird because the way that he does it, he sends it into the show. It's not into a particular episode. So I
Mhm.
think we might have missed a couple of them over the previous weeks because I see no reason why why he would have stopped.
All of a sudden, it
So
just stops for a couple of
yeah,
weeks. Yep.
correct. Yeah,
So again, Dave, really do appreciate
yeah,
that. Thank you
yeah,
very much.
massive.
We've got one from Bitcoinplusfood, which is 100 sat cent using Fountain. It says, you get flu 6 times a year. I cannot comprehend that as being a thing. Isn't that a symptom of being underlying rundown? Keep well.
Yeah,
And we were talking about this in our sickness episode.
yeah. This was wild because I didn't even remember you saying that you got 6 times a year, and I went, man, that guy he must have got it wrong. Beautiful thing, we have the transcript. So I went into Fountain. I didn't even use the transcript on my computer because I wasn't at my computer. Went in there, typed in 6 for that episode. We said 6 a
Bam.
couple of times because we were saying 6 out of 10, and then yeah, bam, sure enough, went to that bit, and you did say you get sick 6 times a year, and I was like,
Yep.
dang,
And
thanks,
that is
there
true.
you
I
go.
mean, I was sick. Yeah, I was sick last week. Even today, starting to feel a little bit off as well. But look, what are you going to get when you're definitely run out? I'll go and tell my child, Bitcoin Plus Food, to just be quiet while I'm trying to get some extra sleep. But thank you very much for that support. And thank you, yes, trying to keep well. Now we've got a couple of big boy boosts coming through here. We've got Adam Curry boosting for less client meetings, 50,000 sat cent using
Woo!
Podverse.
Yeah, boy, thank you very much, Adam.
Adam with the big curry. Thank
I
you very
mean,
much, Adam.
that's honestly one of the things that drew me into podcasting 2.0. It is the idea where it was all funded. It's so weird now because I listen in and I sometimes forget just how rare it is, this thing they've created where it is all just listener supported. It is all just people working together for the betterment of the industry. And sure, there is a lot, they get $500 from a lot of the hosts on a kind of regular basis to pay for the index they've created and whatnot. And from some of the apps, they'll send, Oscar Mary will send in 100, Sam will send in portions, Marco from Overcast. But it's just so rare to see something where it's no bullshit. There's no internal bickerings and meetings and stuff.
Mm.
It's just, I mean, that's kind of why I'm
That's why you love it.
yeah, and why I enjoy podcasting as well. There's none of
No messing about. No middleman. No, I do like that. And again, Dave, Adam, thank you very much. And then
that.
we got another one from Dave. Dave come through with a specific individual boost, which I like. Great episode with Chris. Listen to it while hanging shelves.
Nice.
25,000 sats and using Castomatic.
Yeah, legend. Thank you so much, Dave. While hanging shelves, he must be on a fix of fixing stuff up.
No, and I appreciate that out of the weekly cadence.
Yeah, correct.
Dave, really appreciate it. And then I got one last one here from McIntosh. Now this came in today, 11:44. He said, "Haha, boosted without knowing it. Was going to boost anyway, so here's the message. Good interview, gents. If you want my 2 sats at Karen, I think you should have multiple shows. You already have multiple topics that you regularly do on your podcast. Just my thoughts. I enjoyed McIntosh. 210 sats and using Fountain."
Thank you. That is McIntosh from Generation Bitcoin. So have you listened to that Chris Fisher one at all?
Yes, I've listened to it. I had to listen to it at pretty fast speed and skipping through a
2.25
couple.
speed.
I watched it on YouTube. I had to skip it through a couple of times, but I have listened to the main parts of it.
Yeah, cool. So this is probably linking up to. So thank you very much, McIntosh, from that from Generation Bitcoin, a show that I regularly tune into. The thing that I love about Chris, and I kind of really think is worthy of emulation of investigating more and how we can apply that to the mere mortals, is this concept he has of breaking up his shows pretty regularly, and they're niche, but they're all under this Jupiter Broadcasting band. And I'm really looking at that, and I'm going, I think that might be the way forward. So, for example, the app that you were talking about, and kind of going, oh, okay, maybe not an app. I'll put it on the website. That's a really niche thing. A random blog on a website. How are people going to know about that other than you maybe saying it? This is where I do think we do talk about fitness here, but it's not specific, and it might be worth whipping up another podcast and just the audio. We can post the video if we want to, or we can even just experiment with just audio and being, okay, what if we do just a mere mortals fitness, or just, even be a bit more strategic with the audio, and then, we can discuss, you could do it on your own, I could do something, and we could just make it real quick, dirty, and easy without as much effort as we put in here. And then that's a great way of kind of promoting the training blog. I think that's a good idea.
I did take away that as well. And again, thank you, McIntosh. But specifically, I was thinking, again, the Mere Mortals brand sort of covers now already 3 podcasts, right? Value, the book reviews. I mean, if you want to think about it, the Spanish book reviews when it was around, the podcast in generality. And it did get me thinking of, do we spread it a little bit wider in terms of there's the Mere Mortal as the overarching, media company, if you want to look at it in that structure, with getting a little bit more niche specifics, because, we might want to be talking about fitness, or we might want to be talking about specifically like philosophy. Would that be better, and would also be worth the extra amount of, work that would go to set it up? But yeah, it was an interesting point, because you're right. Some of our more niche conversations just get lost in me mentioning it, in a 30-second spot in a 1-hour podcast.
Yeah. I think that one in particular might be something that we can talk about it more offline. I was saying that in the monthly goals as well, where it's just, I think that could be something that would be, if we don't focus on the video aspect at all of it, and it's just pure audio, that is something that I think would be doable, quick and easy, and also kind of be that kind of experimental branching out that we could try into something that is rather niche, but that we have a whole lot of experience of, the fitness stuff. That I think that's one thing we're kind of underutilizing, to be honest, is the 2 decades plus training that we have between us of really focused, uh, effort of fitness, of improving your body,
Mm.
of dealing with injuries. There's a whole lot of knowledge that we don't stack up and we don't use as much as I think we could. So yeah, something to think about
Yeah.
for the next little
But
while.
in any case, appreciate McIntosh that the little
Yeah,
boost
definitely.
got us definitely talking and thinking about things, and to everyone who supported through with those boosts as well. Thank you very much. Obviously, people streaming as well. That
Yeah,
also helped.
man, that's a worthy call out because I was just looking at the Albi, and yeah, there was some like big streams coming in as well. I saw people sending in like 60 sats per minute. It was like,
Wow, that's
damn,
huge.
10
Damn.
sats, 10, yeah. There was some big ones coming in.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, in any case, look, always appreciate it is these boostergrams and that funding that comes through from a value for value model that allows us to continue to create the podcast, put things back into the podcast to improve it, and hopefully one day be the main thing. We're talking about the main thing. If you want to help us out in making sure that this is the main thing, and we're putting all of our efforts and all of the quality that we can, plus all of this stuff that we're talking about and more. It's Boostagrams that really help us out in doing that, and that's
Mm.
the predominant way that we're helping.
And
It'll help
and
us in terms of supporting.
and letting us know as well, if you would prefer a show where you enjoy listening in, but you don't want to hear about crypto stuff, you don't want to hear about podcasting 2.0, let us know. And if you would listen and tune into a fitness dedicated podcast from us about handstanding, about CrossFit, about bodybuilding, about nutrition, about that sort of stuff, it would be very much appreciated to know that.
For sure, for sure. Okay, let's get back to the main thing.
Yeah, man.
And so I was just saying before we started into the Boostagram Lounge around the superfluousness of things, also with the caveat around the time structure or time domain. And what I meant by that is there are often there's that you can have main things, but often case you have a main thing during a particular time domain. So I'll give you an example of personal life. So it might be, that I have a main thing that I want to be fit and healthy, or that I want to make sure I'm getting the work done on right time, or I want to be making sure that we're communicating around the podcast and having the right notes and all that. And all those things can be main things. But if I'm changing a baby's nappy and I've got shit on my hands, right? That is not the time that it is unnecessary to be trying to send Karen an audio message around the podcast tonight, or thinking about a myriad of other things or trying to find out other things. No, the main thing at that time is you changing a baby's nappy. That's what you're doing, all right? And that takes a little bit of effort, a whole lot of mentality, especially if you're running on no sleep. And so it's also crucial to know that there can be things that are superfluous at particular times of the day, at particular times of how you carry on your day-to-day living. So there's, and in this essence, I was going to ask you whether you even really think about this or put any structures or methods or techniques in place to avoid the superfluousness of life in quite targeted ways. To give you an example, for me, I don't almost have to do this, but with training, I really don't really. I'll probably say it's very rare for me to be using the phone from a messaging or checking social media perspective. I'm usually just listening to music or a podcast and training. It is very, very hard for me to find to go down the path of doing unnecessary things, which it takes away from training. But that's just because I've been doing it for so long. In other areas of life, though, especially when I'm hanging out with friends, being with family, I set up my phone on specific modes so that I'm not getting any notifications. So it's the equivalent of your do not disturb, and I do that in different type of scenarios. So I'm much more focused. There's no things that are going to take me away or entice me to be going down and doing superfluous things. But even when it comes to aspects of reading or cooking or even talking with my partner, there are other superfluous things where I'll either put my phone to a different area, or if I know there's a task to get done, so specifically for this podcast this morning, I had to make some notes. And I had a couple of other things going around. I went, hey, it's unnecessary right now and to do this particular task for me to be listening to the song or putting this video that I was trying to watch at the same time. So I was trying to watch it as I was doing this. I was like, okay, no, obviously that's not an important thing when I'm just trying to get this done. And I was able to get the notes done quite quickly. But if I was trying to, sometimes you call it multitask or have all these other unnecessary things, while it feels like you're getting more done, you're not really. And so there's a lot to be said about those specific time domains when it helps and it doesn't. But do you have any methods or techniques beyond the do not disturb on your phone that helps you try to avoid maybe other superfluous things in specific times of day?
Mm. I've actually noticed when you were saying that, I think that that is true, and that there is certain aspects which will get you. So, for example, it's only ever when I'm on my own. When I'm out with my family, when I'm out with friends, if I'm going to a meetup, if I'm training, even with other people, it's very much I don't get lost in the unnecessary things. It's just something I think about those times because I'm actually interacting with others, and I think that's kind of basically always a benefit for me. The more I spend time with other people is usually a good thing. Just a little caveat here was when I got sick this last week, I was kind of iffy if I was going to see my normal handstand friends on Sunday for our normal kind of session together because I just didn't want to get them sick, but I felt like I wasn't oozing stuff anymore, so I went with them. Man, I was on fire that day from the very get go. It'd just been a full week without basically any contact with humans, and I was like joking around, I was playing around, being silly, and that was I was in the moment. Then that was really
Mm,
connected with people, so that's always a good thing for me. I think it's when I it's a task where it's kind of non-critical or it's non-time domained. So when I go to bed, for example, and I'm reading, I typically read for anywhere from half an hour to an hour. And it's just very much there's a cap, there's a limit of, oh, I've got sleep to come up. So if I spend 20 minutes on my phone, that's 20 minutes I can't spend reading. So those ones, this is kind of getting into procrastination a little bit. Where I notice myself doing superfluous things is typically creating clips. For example, I've got 3, 4 videos where I need to create clips from, and it's taken a bit more time because I'm starting to put captions on it. I'm trying to experiment with some different things, and with them, I'm creating them for this kind of future scenario. I don't need them right now. I've already got enough clips for like the next
mm,
week. And so that's when I'll notice myself. I'll click on something, I'll be doing something, and then next thing I know, I've got an additional page open, or I'm responding to this email, or I'm dealing with what's I've got it here. I just got an email from the government about how because I've turned 31, there's this ridiculous thing related to lifetime health cover and loading. Have you heard of this before?
I have not. What?
Yeah, yeah. I only heard about this about half a year ago, and I thought the girl who told me was full of shit. And then I just get this today, and yeah, it's basically like you have to pay for more if you get lifetime health cover in the future if you don't get it soon in the July after your 31st birthday. Otherwise, you have to pay more or something. I don't know. But this is the kind of just distracting thing where it's something I need to deal with. I don't need to deal with it right now, but when I'm creating clips, this is when this will start intruding, and it's like, yeah,
Gotcha.
maybe I should Google that. Maybe I should
Mm.
figure that out. So yeah, typically for me, it's kind of that procrastination type thing where
And
it's
they kind of go hand in hand, right? It kind of goes hand in hand because sometimes you will procrastinate by doing something else, and that something else is superfluous to the task at hand that was supposed to be the main thing.
yeah, but thankfully for me, it's not on critical stuff. So
Mm,
if I've got a podcast that needs editing and producing and it's going out the next day, the Chris Fisher one, for example, I edited that basically all on the Monday where it got released. I wasn't dicking around, man. I was 100%, you know, editing, creating this, creating the chapter
mm.
markers, getting chapter images, doing all of that, and I got it released on time, and it was because I wasn't distracted. But yeah, it's just when I have those kind of it needs to be done, but it doesn't need to be done right now. That's when maybe some superfluous stuff will start to creep in.
Yeah, and I think also on that point, it's when you put when it's time sensitive, when there's time pressure, you'll often find yourself doing a task almost much more directly and without the superfluous things because you don't have the time to
Mm.
have that flex to have the void. Kind of with your sleeping, if you're bookending it with sleep, if you're going to do half an hour, you've only got such limited amount of time, and if you start doing superfluous things, that's it. Like you're not generally going to go, okay, well, I'll just stay up till 2 a.m.
Yeah,
reading
correct.
to make
Yep.
up for it. No,
Yep.
it's not going to happen. I've got one last question for you, and it's a little bit off to the right here, 90-degree turn on this particular question, but I thought it'd be interesting because often, so I was doing a bit of Googling with superfluousness, right? And where it sort of ended up, and even what does ChatGPT say? What do some of the articles say? And heaps of stuff that came up to it is, superfluousness. It's about minimalism. It's about being a minimalist. How much do you think, at least, it leads? Is a life down the path of avoiding superfluousness? Is it ultimately a minimalist life? Do you reckon?
I was looking at this. Let's look at this through the lens of speech. We were kind of hinting about this before. So, another thing of creating the clips has made me realize is shown in the light, pure daylight. Wow, there's a lot of unnecessary speech and there's a lot of tangents and not even just the ums and ers and whatnot, but straight up sentences where you're trying to tell a point and you deviate to say this extra little additional thing, which
Hmm.
doesn't matter. And it ruins the clip that I'm trying to create. Fuck you, Kyron. Fuck you, Pete. Fuck you, Juan. You just ruined this shit, and now I have to either do an extra edit and cut, and which I don't like doing, or I just scrap that bit entirely.
Hmm.
So there is a lot of this kind of waffle. What I think though is it's not necessarily unnecessary either. So we're going to see this coming up with AI and podcasts, and there's already people who are putting speech recognition software. Uh, you'll notice this particularly with the ads. That's what's kind of the big thing in the podcasting industry at the moment. Oh, you can get host reads without the host having to do the actual read themselves. We've got all the voice generation and whatnot. There's a Spotify doing this in particular, and awesome. We'll just get that and it can be targeted because Spotify has all this data. They know that my name's Kyron when I'm using the app. So it could be like, hey, Kyron, blah, 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 blah. And really niche targeting and whatnot.
Hone in.
What I think, though, is AI podcasts as a whole, they'll fall flat because they don't have this extra waffle. They don't have the one making a funny joke about, Kyron being small or sucking at life and lifting. They won't have Cole McCormick from America Plus. Man, when he reads out his boost, I've never seen someone get so hyped for 100 sats. He goes fucking wild. And there's just something where I think this extra additional stuff is kind of what drags you in, especially if
Hmm.
it's a long form thing. And so this is where I go, these are extra things. Sure, it's nice to get rid of the yeahs that I say from the Chris Fisher interview or the ums and ers or those little deviations. But I think minimalism isn't the best way of putting it. I think that helps certainly for
Hmm.
certain cases, but I'm not sure I'm drawn to minimalism because it gets rid of superfluous things in my life. Maybe a bit. I mean, certainly for physical things, I think that's correct. But for online digestion of content and stuff,
Hmm.
I'm I I'm similar to you. I listen to a lot of things, and I could be way more ruthless with my decisions of what to listen to or not. But I think there's some. It's okay to have the extra, the additional.
Yeah, look, and I had a similar answer because I kind of disagreed with the overall views that yes, it always leads to minimalism, not as a whole. Like I can definitely see it from a assets or what you physically sort of store, but there is, I think, when you're talking about it with the audios or when you're listening to someone, there is almost the fingerprint, like the idiosyncrasies of what makes a human, and when you try to, again, I've tried to do this with, hey, how would Tim Ferriss ask this particular question, or show how Joe Rogan would do this, or how would Jordan Peterson say this, and you read it from the AI, and you can kind of see what they mean, but it's kind of like the equivalent of when you read a Jordan Peterson book, where hey, it was like written by him, but you can tell it's just a little different to when how he actually articulates himself in a lecture in a audio format. You know, when he's actually talking, it's slightly different, and you can see that there's information missing, and that information is the while it could be the likes and the arms, it's in the waffling. It's in between the main points that it makes all the difference for the whole. So, you know, if I was to listen to an interview, let's just say with, I don't know, Ros Edgley talking to whoever, pick whoever, and you know, it was very much just bang, bang, bang in terms of answers like, hey, what did you do? What did you do to get ready for the swim? I did this. I ate that. I did this. I slept this way. Yes, it's you know, getting to the outcome that I want, and it's avoiding everything that is could potentially technically be said as being, you know, unnecessary, superfluous. But I enjoy if he's able to articulate that. Oh, this is where it started. This is where it kind of went through. This was the end. Because even if the outcome of my question was, "Hey, I want to tell you, I want you to tell me what the end outcome was," there's kind of some beneficial stuff to knowing where the journey was, or the waffling in between there. So in between the main things, which adds a whole layer to it. It's similar to also language learning. You can technically say there's a lot of superfluous learning that I'm even doing from a French learning perspective. Like, okay, why do you need to know these extra ways of saying, you know, different bakery produce right now? Like, it's probably superfluous in comparison to other things you could be learning. And yes, that's true, but I have an interest in that. And if I'm going to go to France one day, I'll talk to someone. I feel like that's where I'll be enjoying myself. I'll find more joy. I would rather do that waffling than waffling about learning, you know, how to say president or queen or something else, right? And so someone might look at that in a superfluous way, but I go, nah, actually, I really enjoy having that waffle in there in some aspects. So,
Here's a good example of related to language learning. When you go to another place, the connection that you can feel from as an outsider, that you will get a reaction from people. You can have immaculate German. I could get really, really nice German. I could say things the correct way. I could avoid bad grammar. I could do all of these sorts of things. I could not learn the slang and whatnot. Yet it is the times when you learn this random ass phrase which has, you know, you can even use it in the wrong way. My friend Lucas, who's learning English, he's from Brazil. He's doing this all the time. He's his favorite one at the moment is "I'm not here to fuck spiders, mate," and he's using it in the wrong context. But it doesn't matter because it's such a niche thing for him to say. It's like, oh man, that's funny, Lucas. Like you're really trying. I appreciate
yeah.
the effort. And that's the thing when someone comes here and they're from India and they say "g'day" or "fair dinkum," that's a superfluous thing. They don't need to learn that. There's you know, and there's 5 different ways of saying "g'day, mate." What does "nah, mate," "yeah, nah, yeah." There's
Mm.
all these different ways you can say of saying the same thing, but it might seem superfluous as well. I think this is like the trap, like you were mentioning. It's those little gaps in between which actually can lead to these kind of big outcomes, even though it's really hard to put down. Oh yeah, it's because he said good day that I'm willing to help him more and not be
Then if
angry
you
at
hadn't,
him because he, you know, bumped into my car, or I'm willing to smile at him, start up a conversation with her or him because they said this random thing in, you know, something that was unnecessary.
mm. Yeah, look, in summary for me, from the superfluousness piece, again, this it happens all the time. I'm sure this will happen in every single conversation I reckon we ever have or I ever have with anybody about any topic. It's a dichotomy, right? And most often than not, yes, we're probably doing a lot of superfluous things that we probably should try to get away. We talked about a few of them already on the podcast at the beginning there, but don't forget that there's going to be things that you need to retain the why my it feels like it's superfluous also has a lot of benefit to being there, because it is also almost the pizzazz of life, the the extra details which is technically unnecessary, but that makes it all worth it. It's what makes the in between the main things all worth it. But don't
Mm.
confuse that with them saying everything is going to be like that. No, that's not the case. There's times and place to not procrastinate or avoid, those items. But other times, it's totally fine. In fact, lean into those areas where you might find the beauty in the small details that might be from a language learning or something else. Here's case in point for me. You know, is it necessary to stare at your baby from 1 centimeter away for 15 minutes time when you could go and look at a picture of it? Right. So you can look at this from an efficiency perspective. You can go look at the baby for 10 seconds. That's enough. It's not going to change. That's superfluous. But I'll tell you what, people who are, new parents, you'll know this. And, for people who are planning to do so, you'll see this is you'll spend freaking so much time just looking at your baby close up, wanting to squish it, wanting to know what's going on, even if they're not moving. Dude, it's superfluous. But again, it's the beauty on the small details that either later down the track or even immediately you kind of refer to it and you go, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it, even if it is superfluous in a technical sense.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. For me, I was going to say in summary, it's definitely an intractable problem because even if you can really identify exactly what you want now, this is what I should be focusing on. This is the main thing. In 10 years' time, that Kyron, handsome bastard that he is, will probably disagree with what you think right now. And so unless there's some way that you can find out and focus only on things that both of them will agree upon, I don't think that's possible, but maybe that's a way you could try and eliminate all superfluous things from your life. It's great that you mentioned JBP because he does this thing where he does these time breakdowns and he's talking about a habit and he goes, if you're exercising 10 minutes a day, well, that's 60 minutes a week, that's 1 hour every 50, blah blah blah, and then he'll put it as a percentage of how much it is of your waking time, and you realize, oh, that's actually a big portion. And so I think for things like entertainment, for example, I think all of us can say there is entertainment that is trashy, and it's trashy, but it would still capture your attention, which is the bad, the negative thing. So for me, it is prank videos, it is porn, reaction videos, fight videos, even things in the real world like work arguments, for example. If you're doing small talk with people at your work to avoid whatever, or you're forced into a conversation with someone you don't even like, I put all of those in the kind of superfluous bucket, and that those are the ones where you got to look at your time breakdown. And if you're doing an hour of that kind of work arguments a day, that is a huge amount of your actual like living time, waking time,
Yeah.
per week, per year, per decade sort of deal. And
Yeah.
the last thing was just, I think there are, in a kind of practical note, I think there are ways you can try and eliminate this or highlight it. So for me, for example, where I'm actually consciously paying, so all the podcasts that I listen to that are value for value, that I think there's something there where I evaluate kind of, oh, is this worth listening to? Because I'm paying these people to listen to this. That I think that's a great way of kind of getting rid of bullcrap and dropping shows which are unnecessary, and then also just experimenting things, making access to certain apps less easy. I moved Telegram off my home screen to deeper into my phone. I was checking that every morning. I don't check that every morning now, and I am not the worse for it. Just small things you can do to eliminate stuff.
No, absolutely. Perfect. Good. I like it. All right, folks. Well, me and Mortalites out there, that's been the conversation around superfluousness. I hope you have taken some learning, some ideas. Is there things that you're finding that even us here at the Mere Mortals podcast, are we doing something unnecessary? Are we not aware of some of the stuff that we've been talking about? And if people have been following us for a while, do you go, hey, guys, you're doing this, which is actually completely unnecessary. Why are you even doing this? Call it out to us. Similarly, is there things that, you're now realizing in life and you can, send us through a message and go, hey, damn, thank you so very much. I was actually doing this thing and it's completely unnecessary. Good call out. Thanks for holding me to the line. Whichever way, whatever way you want to contact us. Now you've got ways. You can go to our website. You can send through an email. You can go to any of our social media platforms. You can go through that. You can, if you want to, leave a review on those apps out there. But the main thing that we ask you all to do, if you really want to reach us directly, is a Boostagram. If you're using any of the value for value enabled podcast apps out there, you're able to send through a Boostagram with a small amount of value attached in the way of Satoshis. That gets through to us. We read it out in the Boostagram Lounge. That is the lifeblood for the podcast, folks, right? The value for value model, for it to work, you have to send us through some sort of value based on the value that we have given you. If our two faces and the information that we presented here over an hour is kind of valuable, then motherfuckers send some money. Send some money through in Satoshi forms. Now, if you don't want to do that and you want to support us in other ways, you can share the podcast out to friends. You can tell people about it. You can communicate. And, we've, on the last couple of weeks, we have been asking questions around, hey, are you finding this interesting? And we're posting things around, hey, give us some feedback around this. That also helps the podcast get better. So if you can, obviously react to that. If you're not in the position that you can support us through a Boostagram and Satoshis, then that also is a secondary way you can support. But that is the main way that we ask for the support here at the Mere Mortals.
Definitely.
Beautiful. All right, folks, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining. Take care. All the best wherever you are at home. Mere Mortalites 1 out.
Karen out. Peace.